This episode of Everyman's Arsenal podcast is proudly sponsored by Nocturn Industries. Introducing the Daisho Bridge, seamlessly connect two night vision monocles to create a powerful dual tube setup. And don't miss out on the Chimera, Nocturn's panoramic night vision goggles. Upgrade your night vision game at nocturnindustries.com and use discount code TLDCO. Nocturn Industries, lighting the night for Everyman's Arsenal. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Everyman's Arsenal, a podcast dedicated to learning more about the people behind the gear that you see on the Thin Line Defense Co. YouTube channel. And I'm excited to have Lev from Agilite on today. Lev, what's going on, brother?
Hey man, good to see you. How's it going?
That's going great, man. It's only been about a month since I've seen you at SHOT Show, but good to
Been a
see your
month already
smiling
since
face
the SHOT
again.
Show? There's no
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Like, wait,
almost. How are you?
it's flying. Time is flying. It's great.
Yeah, I know. For our viewers, you have been seen on the show or on the channel a lot because of our SHOT Show content. We have a lot of Agilite fans in our viewership. But can you talk a little bit more about your background and kind of what brought you to Agilite?
Sure. Yeah. I moved to Israel at age 18 back in 2013. I joined the paratrooper battalion or brigade in the IDF, basically. Did my service, and then I kind of met Agilite during my service. So there was this like Facebook post in some group for soldiers or machine gunners or something, basically saying that they're developing a pouch and a vest for machine gunners, a plate carrier, and they're looking for people to test it and give some input. So I reached out, sent them my first email, like my first work email of my entire life at age 19 or 20 or something. Reached out, somehow convinced them that I have something to add. Went to the office, met with a designer there, made some sketches, kind of showed that I want the pouch to come down at an angle so that if you're lying down, you can just open it and it'll be 45-degree angle to the side and you can pull out the drum or whatever. I really remember the meeting. Um, Made a couple sketches on like a whiteboard. The guy made some sketches. We talked, we had fun. And then I think I might have left them a stolen machine gun, like a negative drum from the military. And then a couple months later, they gave me a prototype. They asked me to test it in the field. So I put it through all the trials and tribulations. We had a lot of training periods and workups and stuff like that, where we'd hike kilometers and kilometers with it. So I had a lot of fun. Everyone was super jealous of me. They still are now. And after that, basically, I went to the CEO and I was like, "Hey, can I work here?" He's like, "You need to go learn design because no, you can't work here. You can't just waltz in fresh out of the army. 'Cause everyone gets out of the army and they're like so full of confidence. They're like, yeah." Because you're like, when you're in the army, when you're the oldest person in the army, you feel so dominant over people who are like 2 years younger than you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you know everything because you've been there for so long. You know how everything works. And then you get back into your civilian life and then you're like, yeah, I'm going to work here. And they're like, you need to go study first. And you're like, oh, okay. So basically I went to, I think the CEO of the company totally forgot that he told me this because I bumped into him 5 or 6 years later after I'd spent a couple years bouncing between jobs and working as a cook in a kitchen and installing air conditioners and whatever, doing all this random stuff. And then I started learning design and I bumped into him one day. I was working at a coffee shop I worked at, and he came in to get some coffee. He's like, "Hey, Lev." I was like, "Yo, what's up?" He's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm learning design." He's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, you told me to." he was like, "Whoa." So then, a bit after that, called me in for an interview, and then the rest is history, basically.
That's
Uh,
awesome, man.
yeah, it's great. It's been a crazy, crazy time working here at Agilite, and it's
So
just
how
every minute in this crazy industry. It's
how long
insane.
have you been with Agilite now?
About 3 years, three and a
Okay.
bit. Yeah.
So when we saw you, let's see, your SHOT Show 2021, you were like brand new with Agilite then.
Yeah, they were like, okay, now I know you're just in here, so this might be a little shocking. You're gonna come to this thing that's called SHOT Show. You'll meet the industry. You'll find out the people you're serving. You'll meet other guys who are into tactical stuff. I was like, okay, Sure, it'd probably be like, I don't know, a big room. I've been to trade shows in Israel.
Yeah.
They're like a trade show in Israel is like a supermarket in the U.S. Basically, it's like I got to Shot Show and just completely blown away by the first of all by by how many companies sell black AR-15s. Like I don't
Oh
understand
yeah.
who's like does someone collect every black AR-15 that there is? Like I mean, this year it was like lever actions, tactical lever
Yep.
actions, but there's like I was
Yeah.
like blown away by the amount of AR-15s. But yeah, it's crazy.
So
It's
you talked
wild.
a little bit about your reserve detail. How much does that play into like what you design for Agilite? Are
I
the two
mean,
go hand in hand?
it's like the same way that you'd think that like the I mean, I think if I was working at a say an outdoor gear company like
Hmm.
Osprey or something, and I was making hiking backpacks, I would be happy that I can go out and run and go test them. If I was making trail running vests, I'd want to go run with them. I'm
Yeah.
just lucky that I'm in the reserves here in the IDF and that I can design a plate carrier and then go test it. And it's it's great that it ties into. I mean, it's better than designing like I don't know spaceship parts and then watching a live stream of someone from NASA testing it, right? So like,
Yeah.
it's very fun. It's very hands on. You can immediately start testing it, and I kind of like to blur the line between my actual reserve duty and then just the connections I have within some of these SF units here, so I can just roll up and train with them. Um, and pretend like I'm in reserves, which is
Yeah.
funner because then you don't have to do kitchen duty, but you don't get paid. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
So all the
Does
time, yeah.
so I'm very unfamiliar with Israeli reserve duty. Like in America, reserve duty. If you're in the reserves, you do like the National Guard. You have the whole 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. Is it something similar? Like, do you have to do something with your unit every month or every so often?
Every unit has different requirements.
Okay.
It's kind of a budget thing. There's some units that barely get called up. Some people get out of the army. Everyone gets drafted into reserves. Almost everyone. My wife, for instance, in the army, she was a mashaki tash, which means a social worker, basically. So
Okay.
she was an army social worker, and she would do everything a social worker does, but in the frame of the army. Every soldier she had under her care, she would find out about their home condition, see if they need any sort of I don't know assistance with buying food, with finding living conditions, and help out wherever necessary. That's great because she's actually a social worker now, so that was a good
Okay.
preparation for her. But basically, she got out of the army, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't need you. Like people in
Hmm.
reserve duty don't have as much need or use for army social worker as someone who's actually in the army all the time." And is 19 years old and might have just gotten kicked out of their home for whatever
Yeah.
reason. Like, so I mean, some people just don't get called back to Miluim to reserve duty. Some people do, and some people get called up, drafted into a reserve unit, and then rarely ever called for. Some
Okay.
units get preferential budget treatment. I'm sure it's the same thing in the U.S. military and
Yeah.
in every military, right? So
Yep.
there's units that do so much more reserve training than I do. Our unit does what's considered a fairly like medium high amount. We have like 4 or 5 individual days of training where you show up for just a full day from like 7 or 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. of going between like shoot house and flat range and
Okay.
something in between that's like a 3 walled range so you can set up some barriers within and go around corners and do some basic CQB and stuff like that. And then first aid simulator, Krav Maga, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We do a couple of those, which are those are interesting because they're actually mixed. Like they're basically organic on a platoon level, but there's no difference in the training that the platoon commander gets and the medic gets and everyone else. So it's all about your base level of soldiering skills, your shooting, your first aid, the way you move in an urban environment, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, every year we either have like a 1 week long training exercise, or we have a 4 week long deployment somewhere within Israel on one of the borders.
Okay.
So, and then if we have that deployment a week before that, we have a build up to that, which is kind of they treat it also as a training week.
Yeah.
We do a bit, but it's in reserve duty. A lot of the responsibility falls on the individual soldier for staying physically fit, obviously, because you're not going to show up for 1 week a year and suddenly get whipped into shape. You got to be
Right.
doing something about it, you know. And there are people who
So
don't keep up and they fall out, get
yeah.
removed.
Interesting. So there's fitness standards that you guys have to. It's incumbent upon yourself to stay up to those standards.
I mean, it's in my unit at least, it's more of an unspoken standard, and like
Okay.
it's also the kind of people that first of all, it's very easy to get out of reserve duty if you don't want to. Like
Okay.
it's very easy to be released if you. They don't try very hard to get you to show up. People are very motivated to come. When the 7th of October happened, 130 we had 130% um, uh, not recruitment rate, but the rate of people who showed up to answer the
Yeah.
call, basically. So the extra 30% being people who had already been released, like who tried to
Wanted to
come
come
back
back.
in after they were too old or whatever.
Wow.
So we have high levels, and a lot of people, the kind of people that are go to combat units are very often people who are doing jujitsu afterwards or just have kind of healthy lives. And the
Yeah.
people who don't stay in great physical shape, they just really really suffer in the training weeks and stuff because you put on a heavy load, you do some rucking, you people drop out gradually.
Yeah.
People who are kind of getting old and they can't keep up with it anymore. Eventually, at some point, they just call it quits. And also, there's the
Yeah.
social aspect where if you draft with a group of people your age into a reserve unit, and then you're with them for say from age 22 to age 37, something like that, and then at age 37 they've all dropped out and you're the only one left, and then a whole bunch of new younger kids are there. It might not be the same kind of experience you had before. You might not feel like you have the same position within the platoon. You might be the old guy now in the platoon or something,
Yeah.
and it might just be that they have these new guys with younger understanding of military stuff, and they've learned all the new CQB methods, and you're the old guy, and it just doesn't feel like the same experience you used to have. So some people drop out at that age. Our oldest guy we have in our platoon, Yuri, he's I think 45.
Oh
He's like
wow.
pretty old. Yeah, he was in the Second Lebanon War. Um,
Okay.
Pretty old. He's our like sergeant in yeah in the platoon. He's big.
Now you mentioned October 7th. One of the things that I was kind of surprised at seeing you at SHOT Show this year, and I've talked to some other friends and family members we've talked about on the live chat before. But one of the things that kind of for you individually that was kind of saddened me a little bit, like seeing what happened in your life, because you got married and then shortly after you got married, October 7th happened, you got activated and you were like away from your family. It almost seemed, in the
Yeah,
span of a
yeah.
marriage lifetime, it was almost instantaneous. You're gone fighting a war.
Yeah, we joked about that. My what like with my friends that I like got married to a D, but I'm honeymooning with Hamas basically. Like
Yeah.
I got married two weeks before, 2 weeks before the conflict kicked off basically, and we just started thinking about a honeymoon and settled in and started calling each other husband and wife and all that. And then the
Yeah.
7th of October happened. We were at my parents' house down in Beersheba, which is about 40-minute drive from the Gaza border, basically. So it's not super far. And basically just woke up in the morning to sirens, rocket attacks, basically. So we went into the safe room. And then there's no real internet in the safe room because it's like double concrete walls and all that stuff and steel door.
Yeah.
Come out between rocket attacks and start getting like news updates, and people in my army WhatsApp groups are sending photos of like dead civilians. And there's like this viral video going around of basically some guy in I can't remember if it was Netivot or Sterot, but like a fairly large city near the border, filming from his like third or second floor balcony, like a white pickup truck full of Hamas terrorists, basically just riding down the street, and then a cop car comes by the other direction, and everyone in the car is just spraying automatic fire into the cop car, which then goes off and
Wow.
crashes. And people just like jumping out of a pickup truck, right in the middle of the street in a residential
Yeah.
neighborhood with RPGs on their shoulders and looking around at the balconies and stuff. And people in the, like you can really hear the people's voices in the video and hear their like disbelief and just pure panic, basically. And it basically devolved into straight up urban warfare, fight for survival for
Yeah.
people. And the most brutal aspect I think was that it was all basically live, like it was all on social media.
Yeah.
Sometimes Hamas terrorists were taking people's phones and live streaming on their own platforms. basically their dead bodies or killing them or capturing them, and it was incredibly brutal, and it kind of gave this feeling of like absolute helplessness because um, basically in my WhatsApp group they said like, okay guys, be ready to be called up. Where they've started calling up like logistical members of the group and commanders. Next step is you guys being called up. I told Adi like, Adi, we need to go back and get like I need to go home. I need to get my kit. Like I need to get my stuff
Yeah.
together. I need to pack up my stuff. All I had on me was my handgun, right? Like my wait, can we show this handguns or does that get
Yeah.
caught
Yeah.
up?
Yeah.
So
It's not live, so go for it. Yeah.
all I had was my M&P and one magazine, like a dumbass, and I had a Snake Staff Systems tourniquet in my pocket. And
Okay.
like my friends were all saying like, yeah, let's go down there, let's drive over to the border. And there are people like who literally drove over to the border with their handguns and fought their way to a long gun and just started
Wow.
assaulting these cities that have been conquered in these kibbutzim. And Adi was like, obviously like terrified to leave the house and was like, it's not safe. We should wait for it to calm down. And I was like,
Yeah.
look, I gotta go home and get my gear like immediately. It's an hour and a half drive from Beersheba to my house in Ramat Gan. Um, and eventually she like agreed. And instead of going home, we drove straight to the office, straight to the Agilite office, which had already been ransacked by our marketing director and like two other guys who came and stole all their gear from me to leave. So I grabbed my plate carrier and I grabbed a set of plates and I like just grabbed any piece of gear I saw lying around, grabbed all my extra magazines, grabbed you know eye protection, whatever. Ran home in the car, packed up my bag, and as soon as I was like done packing, got the call where to go, threw it in a duffel bag, tied it on the back of my motorcycle, drove up to base, and drafted. And
Wow.
yeah, and it was just like this like sick feeling that like because it wasn't over, it was still going on, and it went on for
Yeah.
like basically 2.5 3 days until it was completely contained and it was over. I mean, it's not even over now because you still have
Yeah.
hostages. You have 130 something hostages still, condition unknown within Rafah or within Gaza, wherever. But it just kept going on, and um, it was a crazy experience. It was like statistically, numbers wise, if you compared the number of people living in Israel to the people living in the U.S. and the people who died or were affected by it to people who died or were affected by 9/11, it's like the
Yeah.
size of it is like 20 times bigger
Wow.
proportionally in Israel as an event. Like every single person in Israel knows someone who was affected by it, whether they were displaced from their homes, whether they were kidnapped, whether they were murdered,
Yeah.
whether they like barely escaped. And it's just very, very, very brutal. And having the whole thing again live streamed and posted
Yeah.
up there, and videos of it. And like there's the videos that get into the news that are censored, and then there's the videos that are sent in like Telegram groups and on Signal and WhatsApp and
Right.
stuff. Those are the uncensored ones. And it was,
Wow.
I mean, within every story though, there's always the bravery. There's
Right.
the heroes rising up, and there's crazy, crazy stories of people basically saying like telling their wives and children like stay here in the mamad, which is like the safe room that every house in Israel is required to have. Lock the door. Don't open this unless I come back. Basically, no matter what. And then going out and just either fighting to the death with terrorists in their neighborhood or joining up with their neighbors and with their friends who are also armed, joining up with their like quick reaction forces in their kibbutz or whatever, and successfully fighting off terrorists. And
Wow.
it's crazy. It's like chilling.
Now, one of the things that I've heard, and again, not knowing a lot about Israel, but like there's a lot of folks with the Second Amendment in America being so prevalent. They look at Israel and they go, "Well, if Israel would have had something like the Second Amendment, it wouldn't have been as bad." But what you're talking about, it seems like there are a lot of people that have privately owned firearms.
Well,
Um,
yes and no.
okay.
Like basically, there's like owning something like this, like owning a handgun is fairly easy. Anyone who's been a combat soldier in the military, bit of cat hair. Anyone who's been a combat soldier in the military can own a handgun and 50 rounds of ammo, which is fairly
Okay.
restrictive as far as you know. But basically, the way it works is you buy ammo from the range or from the whatever place you're shooting at. But like, um, so you're also most people can only own one handgun, unfortunately, unless you're
Okay.
doing competition shooting, in which case you can own two. So it also kind of makes the handgun market, instead of having a dedicated fighting handgun and a super compact one that you're going to be carrying when you're out walking the dog, it's kind of all Glock 19s. Like it's
Yeah.
very middle of the line. I mean, obviously stuff like the Sig P365s and stuff like that sell really well, and Bull has a good showing here as well.
Yeah.
But it's mostly compact handguns,
Okay.
and the people buying bigger handguns are either people who are doing a ton of shooting and don't mind carrying a bigger handgun, or they're people who are doing a lot of army duty and want to bring their own personal handgun because they don't get one in the army,
Okay.
or they just said everyone says I want a Glock 19 is the best, so they go and buy a Glock 19 and they put a flashlight on it and they appendix carry it or carry it over here for a while, and then
Yeah.
they're like my back hurts, and then they go and get a Mossberg MC2C or something instead.
Yeah.
So I mean, now as far as rifles go, this is definitely something that's changed significantly since the 7th of October. But there are it's called the Kitat Korenut, which means like a readiness squad, and that's people who are basically volunteers who, um, before the 7th of October, unless you were on the Gaza border, you basically would keep your rifle for that in like a central location where it was locked up,
Okay.
basically. Unless you were in one of those positions on a kibbutz, in which case it might be more accessible to you. Now, everyone who's in a kitat korenut, like our CEO now, is
Yeah.
he keeps it locked up in his house, basically.
Okay.
So you have your rifle. He has his handgun. He has a battle belt set up. Obviously, CEO of Agilite, so he has full kit set up.
Yeah.
Um, and if something goes down in your neighborhood, you just take out your rifle, chamber around, and you're good to go, right?
Okay.
But even then, it's like it's when you're fighting, you know, 4,000. I can't remember how many terrorists crossed the border within
Yeah.
hours. Basically, 4,000 terrorists who have RPGs, breaching charges, grenades, all
Yeah.
kinds of bombs, fully auto AKs. Like your handgun isn't doing much, and
Yeah.
you saw that also even cops who are supposedly better trained than civilians, like at the Nova Music Festival, which a lot of people think is the reason why Hamas actually hit Israel on that date on the 7th of October instead of waiting to do it synced up with Hezbollah. So basically, the
Hmm.
Nova Music Festival was a huge like outdoor music festival that was very close to I think it was in Reim. It was very close to the border with Gaza. So they picked that date, hit the festival at like 7 a.m. People were still dancing from the night before, and just
Yeah.
massacred hundreds and hundreds of unarmed dancers and young people. And basically, there were
Mhm.
cops and security guards protecting it who were just gunned down within minutes, because they're returning fire with a handgun,
Yeah.
with Glock 19 or whatever, and they're just getting sprayed by PKM fire and Kalashnikov fire, and just getting torn apart.
Yeah. So I'm curious though, like with you being a newly married guy when this kicked off, like how was the I guess I don't know what you would call it, like the mental dynamics that you were going through because you have gear designer Lev, you have heavy gunner Lev, you have newly married husband Lev. Like how are you able to mesh all of those when there's this crisis happening in your own backyard?
Well, I mean, I basically like it was obviously very hard for Adi, and she was crying when I left the house on the 7th of October. And like I told her, like Adi, that's it. Now you have the full Israeli wife experience, like
Yeah,
the
golly,
Yom
man.
Kippur War experience of like surprise sneak attack from your neighbors, and now you're called off to war and you're going to be gone for months. So it's like, I mean, Israelis like to argue with each other and they like to fight and they like to have like extreme political compasses and hate each other all the time. But
Yeah,
then when something like a war happens, they really the community aspect is insane, and people make WhatsApp groups, like all the wives of and families of everyone in my unit made WhatsApp groups together and met up and helped each other out. And Adi's parents live pretty close by, so they were able to help her significantly. And my dad, who lives in Beersheba, which again is an hour and a half drive from Ramat Gan, and they don't really drive much, so they take the train. So my dad would come 3 times a week on a train, basically a 2+ hour journey each direction, to take my dog Daisy out in the middle of the day,
wow.
wait for Adi to come home from work, take her out for dinner, make sure the house is clean and she's fed, and then not too bored and has like some sort of someone to talk to basically instead of coming home to an
Yeah.
empty house, and then would go
Yeah.
back to Beersheba. So like I knew she was taken care of, and the atmosphere in the country and the vibe in the country in general was just such a single like strong closed fist of support and and so I was, I knew I wasn't leaving her completely alone. She had
Yeah.
friends, family, but it was definitely harder for her, I think, than it was for me most of the time. And I definitely felt that difficulty of not being able to really be there for her, not being able to talk to her on the phone necessarily every day, especially not
Hmm.
once I got into Gaza, and just not being able to tell her when I'd be coming home, if at all, in the near future, and that was difficult. And I didn't really like I immediately prioritized obviously first the military because you have a military objective. You have to go. You have to be there. You're now the property of the military. You have a job.
Yeah.
You're part of a team. That's
Yeah.
priority. You can't let your friends down. You can't let your country down. And then after that, I prioritized a D, obviously. And then way down on the list under that, I put designer lev because as much as I took pleasure in and thought about the gear I was wearing and testing and using and what I would change and what I would add and what new gear I would do or whatever, my number one priority was, my number one and two priority were those two things. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's tough to have to, go out and serve and kind of, because when you go out and you're going to war, you have to close off certain things in your mind and you have to prepare yourself mentally and prepare your mind and prepare your body, and you can't be too nostalgic, and you can't be thinking about the future either. You have to be living in the moment and with very clear precise goals one day to the next. You have to be, we say lechech leshinuim, which means smile for the changes basically,
Oh, okay.
because everything changes all the time. When they say, okay, you're going into Gaza today, you put on your gear, you get ready, you study the maps, you make battle plans, you get on a bus, you drive over, you walk a couple kilometers to where you're supposed to sit down and get ready to go across the border. You sit, you wait for dark, everyone's ready, and then they say, okay, yeah, back on the buses, we're going back. That's it.
Yeah.
24-hour,
Wow.
pushed off 24 hours. So
Yeah.
you have to be in that flexible mental space where you can have these adrenaline rushes, and I can't just be sitting there thinking like, oh man, I can't wait to get home to a D and we're gonna go do this trip, whatever. Like it's not healthy for you. It's
Yeah.
you gotta be strong. You gotta fortify yourself. Um, and you
Yeah.
gotta compartmentalize.
It's interesting too because I'm thinking about as you're talking about all this stuff, I'm thinking about my deployments that I had. I was in the U.S. military, and there's been times where, like when my daughter was born, she was probably about 5 months old when I left for my first deployment. I came back right before she turned one. Um, but it's you kind of don't think about it. Like I was on the other side of the world. My wife and family are here. Like with your situation, it's interesting because Adi, her husband's off at war, but that war is 2 hours away, and so the I can only imagine, like you talking about your dad coming to visit her and take your dog for a walk. Like if she were to come home to an empty house, I can only imagine me coming home to an empty house if my partner was 2 hours away fighting a war. Just what would go through my mind, and that time alone could be detrimental. And I hear what you're saying, like, yeah, you have to put some of those things out of your mind because your focus needs to be on your teammates and what's happening
Yeah.
in the then and now right in front of you.
And also I know Adi is strong. Like I know she's strong. I knew she could handle it. And obviously there were times when she was close to the breaking point or at the breaking point. There were times when I was close to the breaking point. And also
Yeah.
what didn't help is that the changes go multiple directions. So basically, they could say, okay, you're about to go into Gaza tomorrow, or they could also say, you know what, they canceled our going into Gaza by pushed it off by 48 hours. You guys are going home for 36 hours. And then I call a D and say, a D, I'm going to be home in 8 hours or 6 hours, whatever. And
Yeah.
so it's also difficult because you try to compartmentalize and fortify your mind and say, I am not seeing her. I am going to be in the army. That's it. There's nothing I can do about it. And then suddenly I'm like knocking on my front door. So it's like,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, it
That's
plays with
crazy,
your
man.
emotions for sure. And that's kind of, I guess, blessing and a curse of being in a country that's like smaller than New Jersey. So like,
Yeah.
also my parents would be like, I'd call them on the phone from like some random like D9 driver's phone in Gaza or something later,
Yeah.
and they'd be like, "Oh, we heard some nice booming today. I heard some nice explosions. Was that near you?" Like,
Like,
yeah, probably. So it's crazy how small
golly.
it is. Yeah. And also, like, I would see in Gaza, right? I'd be like standing in a guard post at night with my nods on, and I see like shigulim, like rockets being fired, like Gazan rockets being fired towards Israel. And then, 2 days later, I talked to Adi on the phone. She'd be like, "Oh man, 2 days ago, 2 nights ago, like in the middle of the night, they woke me up with sirens, and I had to go into the bomb shelter again." Like, yeah, I
Wow.
know. Like, so it's kind of the same war almost. Which, I mean, in a way, it helps because you don't feel like you're fighting a super disconnected conflict, or you can really clearly feel um, you know, the effect and the meaning of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. It's one thing to be fighting on the other side of the world, but when you're fighting for your own country,
Yeah.
in your own country, I could definitely see the mental anguish that can a person can go through, but also like the fortitude of I need to be the best that I can be for my teammates, for my country, for my family, because I'm the last line of defense. And if I fail, like who's gonna be protecting my family or my country? Um, and so, would you say then? I guess the transition back going from that war mindset, now you're back to designer lev. Is that a harder transition for you to say, okay, I'm not doing reserve anymore, I could put that down on my priority list, now design and husband lev need to be higher on the priority list?
Well, I mean, at some point, like the shock of the 7th of October wore off a bit, and basically, yeah, the shock wore off a bit, and I started, kind of coming back to normal even while in the army, and started working out again, and you know just killing time until going in, and started taking more answering emails again at work and stuff, and like
Yeah.
all of that. And then once I was actually in Gaza, I did at some point like send like a work email by writing a letter and asking Adida to send it to my boss. So like I
Okay.
kind of thought about it a bit, and then I really felt like I had a lot of catch up to do once I got out of Midoim, and it's also the kind of thing where I have no idea when they'll call me back in. So I wanted to get as much. So I just want to get as much done as possible right now, and in all aspects of my life, like in at work and at home. So basically, every weekend, try to get out and do some traveling. I want to do some traveling in the middle of the week. Go out on dates, ride around the motorcycle with a D, and just have this like renewed energy. So we like redecorated our whole like living room and like
Yeah.
organized the whole house, and like it's fun. It's fun to be back, and it's kind of. I mean, I'm just used to. You kind of gotten used to doing the switch because I could get called back at any moment. So I keep
Yeah.
my gear ready, and I'm keeping my body ready, and I keep my mind ready also. And like, there's, I feel like keeping my mind ready in this case, it doesn't mean staying like in army mode and being I'm still in the military, I'm going back to base tomorrow, but it's
Right.
just saying, okay, I've squared that away. I know that if I get called up right now, I know exactly what I need to do. I grab my shit, I say goodbye to a D, I pet my dog, and I leave. Like that's it. Like
Yeah.
it's just knowing that it can happen and being okay with it. And it's and I think the harder aspect is for like mental aspect is that, say, like when we got out of Gaza, basically they like a psychiatrist told us like, okay, now is the time to process the things you saw after the 7th of October in like Kfar Aza and other areas along the border, and like now's the time to start talking about it. Now you have to flip a switch in your brain. You're now out of the army. Now you're a civilian again. You can start processing these things and working through the emotions and all this. And then the commanders are like, tomorrow's war. Tomorrow you're in
Yeah.
Lebanon. Stay ready. Sleep with one eye open.
Yeah.
So like
Golly. What do
balanced
you do?
messaging.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. That
I just
was
I don't. I just go to work.
That's
versus
interesting because
yeah.
I I don't know if it was because of the unit that I was in, but excuse me, on our way back from on my last deployment, on my way back, we had what we called decompression in Germany. So they flew us into Germany. There was like four of us. Um, we sit down with a psychiatrist for a day, like have group therapy, what talk about what we saw, what we did, and then the second day we go out into Kaiserslautern, and they want to see like how do we interact with the community, and if everything's good, then they send us home. And I remember when I get home, I don't know if you guys had to do this, but like in America's military, there's forms for everything. So you fill out like a post deployment form, and there's a bunch of questions you answer. One of the questions: did you see any dead bodies? Yeah, like I'm a cop, right? I see dead bodies on the state side too. So I marked yes, not thinking anything of it, and then I get a call. They bring me into this behavioral occupational therapist lady, and she's like, are you doing okay? You marked that you saw dead bodies when you were deployed. And it was like, yeah, like I pulled a body out of the lake yesterday, lady. Like this is the norm for me. And so for me, that wasn't that big of a dynamic, dead bodies overseas, dead bodies stateside, whatever. But for you, it's like, well, yeah, but those dead bodies that I saw are only 2 hours that way. Again, not on the other side of the country. So how do you deal with that mixed messaging when you know what's near you? You have a therapist that's telling you, okay, time to turn everything off, and then you have the military side saying you always need to be ready.
Yeah, I mean, as far as dead bodies go, I think it's like probably agree with me that it's not just a dead body; it's the context of the dead body, right? Like you can go to a funeral and with an open
Yeah,
casket and see a dead body, and it's not at all, affecting you.
yeah,
But then you see someone who died, shot down in their front door, and then their husband died in the backyard holding a garden hose in their hand, trying to put out a fire in their house, and like they're lying on their back, and the hose still has water coming out of it, and
wow,
stuff like that is contextually much harder to get over and to
oh yeah,
remove those images from your head because you know what's going on. But then on the same day, you see a dead Hamas terrorist like bloated on the side of the road, and you just you're like, ah, whatever. Like, you
yeah,
walk past it, you're like, yeah, you flip him off. You're like, fuck you, So like, it's a whole different. It's all contextual, and I've never had a problem seeing the bodies of my enemies,
yeah,
but seeing the bodies of your countrymen cut down by those enemies is, especially in the environment it was, which was in a kibbutz. I lived for like 5 years in a kibbutz, and just in case anyone, probably most people haven't had any experience with a kibbutz, but like kibbutzim used to be this like really hardcore, crazy, like socialist, communist, like nightmare place where kids were like taken away and like raised communally and all this stuff. But what they are now, they're basically toned way down, and it's just like kind of a almost like a gated community that's so safe and so quiet that people send their kids like barefoot to the corner store
oh wow,
to like go and get ice cream or something, and the standard mode of transportation is like a bicycle, and I would just go out in my like a bathrobe at night to walk my dog and walk all the way around the kibbutz at night, and it's just for me it's just like this, and all around it you have these like idyllic fields and great views, and like it's just this quiet little slice of heaven. And like I lived on one for 5 years, and then I go back to visit every once in a while. And I spent some time on the kibbutzim along the border with Gaza, but then seeing the same kibbutz and just seeing shot out cars on the way up to the kibbutz and
yeah,
bodies stacked up in the against the gates, and basically just spots where tanks had run over cars inside the kibbutz, like Israeli tanks, obviously, but in the
yeah,
fighting to capture it, and corners of buildings blown off and burned out buildings because like concrete buildings, they don't collapse when they burn; they just smoke.
yeah,
They turn black on the inside. Smoke comes out of the window frames, goes up the sides, and just seeing like dead dogs and pets in the streets, and just absolutely no one anywhere alive except for soldiers was the creepiest experience. And like all the lights still on in the road, and like half the houses still have their lights on, but all the houses are empty, and just like just it was the freakiest thing. Like it
Yeah,
was
and
unpleasant to say the least. Yeah.
was that, would you say, like that unknown and kind of going into that type of environment, was that harder than what you were dealing with mentally, leaving your newly married wife and family behind? Would you say that dealing with that separation with your family was harder than the actual military activities that you were
Well,
doing? Like,
I think they're kind of one and the same, but like that was on the 8th and 9th of
okay,
October, so just a few days after the massacre started, and like um, obviously I missed a D, but like this was why I was there, and at least I felt
okay,
like I was being helpful. I was doing something. I was
yeah, you had a
serving,
purpose.
and I was right there on the border on the Israeli side, literally with a line drawn down the middle of the village, which is this side we've conquered, and we're sitting in all these houses. That side is still them. Like that's still
Okay,
Hamas. Anything that moves over there, you can shoot it. Like anything that moves over there is the enemy, and like um, just fighting house to house and clearing houses in a like I was just thinking about combat, right? Just thinking about
yeah,
war. And whenever I thought about a D, it was just thinking like I know she's proud of me. I know she's having a harder time than I am because she's at home watching this on the news,
yeah,
and she has no idea where I am, if I'm safe. As far as I'm concerned, if I have my battle buddy next to me and he's looking at that door and I'm looking at that door, I'm safe. So like,
yeah,
it's like in the army, the only times I feel unsafe is when you make a mistake in like CQB. You know, you go,
yeah,
you're like, oh shit, I didn't see that corner, and then you like feel
yeah,
like oh, right now I'm less safe than I was if I had done it this way. But you never feel
yeah.
really I mean, sometimes you do, right? Like, but I don't know. Like, it
But
was definitely
sometimes it's like
for me.
that military mindset can be, I've seen or I felt, it can be a lot more simple. I see. It looks like they're clearing hallways behind you.
Well, yeah, it's like 7:30 p.m. You know,
Yeah.
all the bosses
Well,
have gone home, so they take out the guns and they start having fun.
one last question that I'm curious about. What's next then? Like, I know you said it's not over. Like, you could be activated, but um, obviously no spilling any secrets. But what's next for the designing, the Agilite designer Lev and the husband Lev? You mentioned honeymoon. Like, we got to end on a good note of what good is coming that you
Yeah.
see.
Well, I mean, Adi and I talked about it, and we were planning on going on a honeymoon like now, basically, but we decided to put it off till a time when it's like basically we don't want to do it and be stressed out thinking that I'm going to be called back at any moment. And like when I go on a vacation after working for a while, I feel like I'm like leading up to it, and I'm like, oh, I can't work another day.
Yeah,
I gotta go on this vacation. Um, right now, we both kind of feel like we have a lot to catch up on as far as just living our lives and being together as a married couple. And like, well, we're gonna go on like a short trip,
okay,
hopefully a couple short trips abroad. Um, but it looks like the honeymoon we're gonna push off until like I don't know, maybe November or something, and then really start planning it and get excited for it and work up to it, and that's that way. I think it's just gonna be a little bit better, a little healthier. Because I feel like if I flew right now or like a week ago, like we planned, I wouldn't be able to mentally detach fully, and I wouldn't be able to detach fully from the country and
yeah,
from the experience and from all the work that needs to happen in the office. And yeah, I just feel like I have a lot to do,
yeah.
and yeah,
Well, Lev, man, I know it's late for you. I appreciate you taking some time to talk with us and share a little bit about your experiences. Anything else you'd like to touch on before we close out here?
I mean, Boaz will kill me if I don't say something about Agilite. I don't know, like I don't
Yeah,
know. No, I just like it was. I mean, we talked about like machine gunner Lev and husband Lev. I think there was a point where designer Lev started to really have fun, and like that was just like the seeing my whole unit basically
yeah,
with K zeros and with full
that's
gear,
awesome.
and just like every bumping into all these different units, because you never know who you're going to run into when you're in a war zone. You go out to
Yeah,
do some sort of mission, and suddenly you bump into like Shavdag or Matkal or whatever units, and just seeing people wearing like stuff I designed in the field was
Yeah.
just so fun. Just like I did that,
Yeah.
like I had a part in that, so that was really fun. And
Well, and
just
it's
having
like,
my own gear that I designed, and yeah,
and
there you go, nice.
I keep it right next to me pretty much. It's in my main bedroom.
Hell yeah, mine's
Um,
right here, but I keep mine at
this
work.
is the Lev designed one. Uh, has extra special touches from Lev.
I keep my plate
Yeah,
carrier.
and that's something that they talked about was you got. I mean, I love the K0. I love how comfortable it is, and that was one of the things we talked about at Shot Show was Boaz was like sleeping in his K0 when
Yeah,
he was on reserve duty, and I'm sure a lot of you guys had to deal with the same thing.
yeah. I mean,
Golly.
it's not as uncomfortable as you'd think, especially if you're a side sleeper. Obviously, if you're sleeping on your back, you're gonna be having
Yeah,
a hard time in a plate carrier. But if you're a side sleeper, you just flip this compartment all the way over, lie down on your side. Sometimes I would cheat a little bit and I would pop this out and put
yeah,
both shoulders on one side and just sleep like that. Sleep great. It's almost like a weighted blanket. It's very soothing, you know.
I bet.
Not changing socks, that's annoying.
Yeah, one of the things that I'll say for a for a segue, I guess maybe an awkward segue, but I was talking to Boaz about when we were at the Agilite booth. I thought it was funny because you were showing off the inner belt. We've shown some content of this already, but do you remember that guy? Like he wanted to see the belt, so he just tore it off the wall, and you were like, "No, no, 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 leave that's not supposed to move there."
Please don't.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'm curious because I've heard. Hopefully, I'm not going to ruin anything, but Boaz told me, so I'm going to take it as gospel that the date that the belt is releasing is March 7th.
When did Boaz say this?
March. He told me today.
Oh, so yeah, it's probably more up to date than I am. As far as I'm concerned,
Okay.
once design is over, I don't care. Do whatever you want with it.
Well,
Like,
now one of the things that I love the whole magnet lockup in the back, but can you talk a little bit more about this new belt that you guys are going to be bringing to market?
well, yeah. I mean, actually, I have the belt here that I wore in Gaza the whole time, basically, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, I was just thinking, like, this is almost at the end of the design stage. We've done a bunch of external testing, but I really haven't put enough hours on this thing, and then bam, war. So,
Yeah,
um,
just good
yeah,
luck.
it's got some nice wear and tear on the Cobra buckle there.
Yeah.
Just wear it nicely. Um, Anyone with a shiny Cobra buckle is a poser, just for common knowledge. And basically, no, it was really fun being able to to be putting on every day a belt that I designed, and also like some of the features, like the magnet thing, right? It's all about being able
Yep.
to put it on without looking, being able to always get it right. And what I didn't even realize is that one of the main things that was nice about it, if I could just throw my plate carrier on real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, tuck in there, get all fancy. So
I could throw a picture of the belt over this so people aren't watching you tuck your shirt in.
whatever. Some people will enjoy it. Anyway, so when I'm all kitted up, which we were all the time basically, because we're not always ready for to go out and attack. So I don't always have like a backpack on, for instance, and I
Yeah.
don't always have my battle belt on, and I don't always have my machine gun on me, it's next to me, right? But you always want to have your ballistic plates on for
Yeah.
the minimum protection, and your helmet is always within hand's reach. So what's really nice about this is that without actually without seeing anything, without being able to see what was going on down here, I would just hold it like this, click in, and then
Yep.
close my belt. So, and then I know it's attached. So that
Yeah.
was like so nice, being able to do it like that, and knowing that it's going to be in the right place, my holster's in the right place,
Wow.
and all that every single time was just so nice. Other people are like taking their belts and they're trying and they're like, did I get it right? And they're feeling around and shit. I'm just here clicking it in and then closing it up, and that
That's
was
amazing, man.
so fun, like real time saver.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because at least for me, I think like, what else can possibly be included in the belt world? Because it seems like everything's been done before, and then you guys come out and do this.
Well, I mean, it's kind of, I feel like there's a couple different ways you can approach design. I think too many companies I mean, I think everyone wants to innovate, right? Like
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
wants
yeah,
to innovate. Nobody wants to be making a follow along product or like a tag along product or just a copy of someone else's product. But I
right.
think a lot of people go to innovate and they just don't know what to innovate. So they focus on the material or they focus on one tiny pain point that they had. We don't. We use, we use our TV program. We have so many end users who have so many more hours behind a gun than we do, and who just obviously their combined hours is insane. And like you have people who have been in the military for 40 years, and you have these instructors, and you have like basically you have guys that are the craziest, most tactical guys out there, and you have people who give you such good advice, and we have basically the ability to just say, okay, battle belts, what's going on? What do you guys
Yeah,
like? What do you not like? Find out what are the pain points in the market, what are the actual issues people are facing, and what features do people want. And then once you have that stuff, it's just a matter of implementing it. And obviously, that's the hard part, right? Like, so you find out that alignment of the belt is the number one pain point with belts. So you say, okay, why is no one else addressing this? What's going on here? And then
yeah,
you try out a whole bunch of different concepts, a whole bunch of different directions, and eventually something works and something sticks, and you start testing it, and you find out, oh, it doesn't work. So you start another direction, and you start testing it, and you find out, yeah, this works a little bit better, and then you get to like all these engineering challenges. I mean, and then at the end of the day, sometimes the best thing to do is just the simplest thing. It's just this, magnets. Boom, so
yeah,
easy. And like, you don't want something that's necessarily super complex either on combat gear.
right.
You want it to be something that's dumb enough that it can be ideally be repaired by an idiot in the field in the rain. And if it can't be repaired, then it shouldn't be that bad that it's broken. It should fail
Right.
safe. So like,
Yep.
it should fail in a way that it still works.
Yeah.
So and making it grunt proof is also important. So, yeah, I mean, it's so nice being able to start a project like the Battle Belt, knowing exactly what are the actual issues that need to be solved, not having to like make up my own pain points or try to think and be like, okay,
Yeah.
how do I make a belt that's different than everyone else? I don't want to make a belt that's different than everyone else. I want to make a belt that's better than everyone else. I want to make a
Yeah.
belt that actually solves issues. I don't just want to make a belt that looks different. I don't just want to make a belt that like I mean, some people obviously are doing a great job innovating. There's a lot of companies who are really pushing the envelope, but there's some companies that just, put shit out, and you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
why?
It's true.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. I got to get my hands on one. I loved
Hell
it
yeah,
when I saw it at Shot Show, and hopefully I could.
yeah.
Oh, you know what? The other thing too. Oh, never mind. I'm not going to get into that. I'll bug Boaz.
Yeah, we'll get you one, but not this one. This one's mine,
Yeah, yeah,
and
no,
this
not
one's
that one.
terrible at this point. Yeah, yeah,
Well, I'm a huge Agilite fan. We love coming by the booth every year, seeing you guys. I know we've talked about Walsh and I have talked about we got to make a trip out to Israel sometime and come by your guys'
hell
offices
yeah,
and check it out. And then also open invitation. I know that's one of the things that you talked about coming out to the States and doing some training. Dude, we got guns, we got ammo. You basically just need to bring clothes and we could make sure that you have a great time. We'd love to see you. We love everything that you guys put out and looking forward to seeing more of what Lev is designing for Agilite in 2024.
hell yeah. Thanks. There's
Awesome, brother.
thanks for the invitation. First of all, it sounds amazing.
Yeah,
I'm all about it.
absolutely.
I'm all about it. And yeah, and like the team. By the way, the team I have here like rose to the occasion as a crazy level, with their like head designer gone in a war for 4 months, and like
Yeah,
they just stepped it up like crazy. I mean, oops, shit! I touched the. I was standing against buttons. If I push the button by
don't do that.
accident, yeah. Anyway, they stepped up like crazy, and I got some crazy designers putting out some really cool stuff for this year. Some
Oh,
of the stuff
awesome,
we saw at Shot Show, some stuff you'll see next Shot Show, and of course you'll see it before. So,
awesome.
hell yeah, there's some
All
cool
right,
stuff.
brother. Well, hey, you stay safe out there. Say hi to the wife. You guys, we
Dude,
love you guys. We're praying for you and hope everything goes
thank
well.
you. Thanks, man. It was a pleasure. Let's do this again
Yep,
soon.
you got it.